interest rates have quadrupled. These developers are also business owners and they have to run a household as well. Building a house in itself is a finite game. Developing is an infinite game. You're always looking at ways to continue adding value, but obviously cutting costs, increase profit margin, or pass that cost on, right? That's just the game.
Find your builder first. I think that's probably the most important factor because a builder can really help with the whole design process and minimize your costs. If you're looking at doing a duplex development and then you're planning on selling one, go out and have a look at every duplex that's up for sale. Like really do your research for months and months before you actually do something.
Find yourself a good broker. Hello and welcome to another episode of From Why to Wealth. We are an educator-based platform helping mums, dads and business owners achieve their financial objectives. We just so happen to do loans. On today's episode, we will be discussing diverse real estate market with real estate development with our real estate guru, Jason McHale from the Property Co Group, and finance broker, Andrew Ganami. Welcome, gents.
Thank you.
Thank you, mate.
Thanks for having me.
Been a long time coming, Mr. McHale.
Yeah, I've been pretty excited for this actually.
I know you have been.
I've been asking you when I can appear, so I'm...
Usually I invite the guests, but Jason invited himself. Love it. Jason, look, I believe in our conversations of recent time, what we have discussed is real estate development, whether it's commercial or residential. How do you weather the perfect storm? The challenges, rising bill cost, skyrocketing finance costs, soaring construction prices. They're making so many projects unfeasible, particularly people who bought properties. Let's give an example. Mid to pre-COVID, thought it was a great site to buy. By the time they put in their feasibility post-COVID with DA approvals and so forth and the contingency, a lot of it has blown out of proportion and really eaten into the profit margins. What we're trying to touch on here is both sides. So both sides from a development perspective for you're a commercial developer or you're a developer building in the residential space, for mums and dads in particular, knocking down, rebuilding, buying a block of land. And you're seeing that now, Andrew, with people coming in trying to build They're built dream homes. Jason, you're the expert. What are you seeing with what's the word on the street with developers, particularly developers with their current stance on this?
Yeah, look, it's no secret that the supply levels are way lower than what they need to be and what they should be, especially on previous years, government expectations, all those kind of things. I think there's kind of two divisions to the building and development game at the moment. There's the class 1 construction and class 2 construction.
Just elaborate on the class 1 and class 2.
So class 1 is more like a duplex, a house, basic townhouses that are above ground, no basement, where class 2 becomes something that's more strata subdivision, common basements, common areas, and apartments basically. So large scale townhouses up to apartments and then even some duplexes. So class 2 construction has had a lot more changes over the last three to 4 years. With policies changing, with build costs, with the type of developers that are actually involved in that. Where class 1 is quite simple. I think it's obviously been affected, class 1, where the duplexes because of the rise in build costs, but nowhere near to the amount with class 2.
What are you seeing from council?
Oh.
Is that a podcast in itself?
I think that's it. Yeah, I think we can speak about that for hours.
They've tried to, because really build times have doubled. If you just pretend, you got just explain. You've got DA.
Yep.
If we just narrow it down to residential at the moment, you got DA and you got CDC.
Yep.
Now DA is you go through the full council process.
Yeah. So just to touch on with build times nearly doubling, it hasn't been too much of that class 1 construction, more that class 2. So the apartments, where a lot of apartment builders on a basic apartment project would have completed it within 14 to 16 months. Now that's looking over 2 years.
Is that due to it's moving from council to state? to make those decisions and more
it's more
green
around
environments?
the Builders Practitioner Act, like the building commissioner, all those kind of things that he's enforced, like obviously cleaning up the industry as well. And I think a lot of trades and even certifiers, all those kind of people associated with the whole development process have made things more difficult, essentially, obviously for the right reasons, but more difficult. And that's kind of pushed out those build timeframes. But back to your question around the DA and CDC process. So CDC is pretty limited in what you can actually get approved. It's more for duplexes. There's obviously a lot of compliance things where, we're working on a project at the moment together where we had to do the DA rather than the CDC because of the frontage requirement. But yeah, CDC, you can do your duplexes, you can do terraces, so manor houses, things like that. But with the DA, it's still taking a minimum of 6 months in our local councils. So, and for apartments, then I've seen a few processed recently in the Sutherland Shire that are between 12 months and 2 years. So
for those seasoned developers, particularly seasoned developers, they sort of mitigate the risk of buying a block of land, knowing they've got projects on, and the one that they've bought to build a duplex, they know it's going to take 12 to 18 months to be approved. So they'll currently work on their existing project, finalize that before they move on to the next one.
Yeah. Well,
very rarely there's that little gap.
Back to that kind of class 1 and class 2 division. Class 1, they're not having major issues because you're usually in and out within 4 to 6 months if you're a DA. But yeah, it's back to that kind of class 2 because previously you might have been able to acquire a site, approve it within, 6 to 9 months and then build it within, another year and a half. So it's a whole 3-year process. But now if the approval process is nearly taking a year and a half, the CC, so the construction certificate process, is taking at least 6 to 9 months on top of that. So you're already up to 2 years, and then your building timeframe of another 2 years, you're 4 years. So, or even probably 5, because especially, and what you touched on before, a lot of the sites that were bought pre-COVID for apartment sites are now pretty much unfeasible. Like there was a site that we were involved in Sutherland recently that would probably be around 26 apartments. And we had offers on that around that 2018, 2019 market where it would have been 200,000 per site. So 200,000 per unit you could build, and then it ended up transacting for around like 165. So it's a pretty aggressive drop, and there's been larger drops than that. I think things that were selling at 200 a site, and most developers won't even touch at 130, 140. So, and that's over a 5 to 6 year period.
You look at it, how many apartments you're talking about? You're looking at about a 70 to 80 grand job per apartment plus 10 apartments at a minimum, correct?
But yeah, pretty much, yeah. So like even what you touched on before saying the perfect storm, like it's not just the build timeframes blowing out and the approval process blowing out and the CC process blowing out. It's also, we're talking about back in 2019, like how much are we talking about for construction finance as a percentage?
Well, on that, and I guess what we also will touch through today is, the build times have doubled. We've discussed your supply chain issues, the regulatory hurdles, labor shortages, also the interest rates.
Yeah.
Yeah. They've 3 times what they were.
Yeah. Like what would you have said, construction?
I hate saying the pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Right. But let's call it pre-2020.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're lending, up until 2021, you're still lending at 2.5%, 3%. Will we see those days again? Nobody knows. But then now you're paying anywhere from 6+%. People get a bit confused. So standard residential dwelling construction, even up to a duplex, you're still paying residential rates.
Yep.
Where it becomes 4+ in one line,
so
that's
more
when
than
it
4
moves
dwellings.
more into the development space. But the rates are still on par. They're not really overly expensive in comparison to where people assume that they are. Right. So people assume 9-10%. Well, they are. That's development finance / what they call mezzanine lending, which we'll touch on that a little bit later. Also, the construction costs have soared. I know pre-2021, you'll be able to buy a linear meter for timber, a linear meter for quote me if I'm wrong, less than $2.
Yeah.
Now, what are that?
I don't know the intricacies of exactly for timber and things, but I know everything that we've done associated, it's between 40 and 60%.
There you go, 3 to 4 times, even more, so up to 6 times.
Yeah.
So the construction costs have soared, discussing, why so many projects are unfeasible and how developers are adapting. And really it has all a roll-on effect to consumers.
Of course, just touching on just those rates, like you're talking about people paying now interest at double the amount that they used to for a development process. And then on top of that, they're now holding it instead of for 2 to 3 years, they're now holding it for 4 to 5 years.
But do you see any value increase in the block of land that they have?
But that's the problem. Like we look at houses have gone up quite a lot. Apartments have gone up, but not to the extent that houses have in that whole post-COVID era.
Can you not call it post-COVID? No. Post-2021,
I knew I was going to get kicked back as soon as I said that.
But yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I think the power of the media predominantly having, I don't know how you'd put it, people coming out to the market to discuss certain things that have sort of alluded people to what we're discussing in particular. But if we touch on a point of view, interest rates, you're right. I mean, per 100,000, you were paying 2,000 at 2%. Sorry, 20,000.
Yeah.
They're gone 4%, 6%. So 2, 4, 6, 8. They're going up.
Like you go simply from 2 to 6. You're tripling, and then the time frame of that lending period is also double.
But that property is still valued at what it was pre. 2021. There's no value in the land, not a significant value. And the thing that we have troubles with a developer is they're great at what they do, but the bank doesn't really care that it's DA approved. So you come in, you buy, and what we're seeing in our local area out west here in particular, they'll buy a house, get a DA for a childcare, and all of a sudden it's worth $4 million. The valuer, forget about the bank, the valuer doesn't deem that value at $4 million because you're basing it off a DA.
Yeah. But then that's a whole nother kind of thing that we can discuss as well, how difficult it is to lend from banks now for larger kind of commercial scale projects. Like that's just and then you've seen it and we've discussed it before, like how many people are now going into the non-bank space.
Absolutely.
And we've discussed that on a couple of
but there's multiple reasons for the non-bank space.
Oh yeah, but it's simple. Like you obviously pay that little bit more, but the pre-sale requirements are less, and obviously the banks are looking into the feasibilities a lot more in depth.
QS reports have come back in, and people are paying a bit of a min for that. Andrew, you've come into the finance industry post 2021,
post COVID,
post 2021. You are not privy to those conversations. The conversations of the 2%. What kind of conversations are you having, regardless whether it's development, construction? What conversations are you having now, rate wise?
Just before you jump on that, how I speak to my dad about the 18% interest rates, and I don't really understand it. That's how he thinks about the 2%. Hasn't seen it. It's like a myth.
Honestly, I have conversations with clients and they come telling me, I wish we were back in the 3% days. But it's a shocker. And then the feasibility as well. We got the buffers in place now with banks where they're now assessing you at 3%. Some banks knew these days were coming and they used to assess you back at 3 days. But
every bank has got economists for this particular reason. But your conversations now, if you can give somebody a 6.1% rate, it's like, hey,
cracker, you're doing well. You've done something right.
Absolutely.
But,
so you haven't had those conversations. So if we go back to your dad, you're saying the 18% wages were at $200-300 a week. Now the rate's at 6%. Your average wage is 80,000 plus. So but the cost of living is slightly higher. I mean, they go on the touch points off topic a little bit here, but the Coles and the Woolworths and so forth. We get it. We understand. Whatever the science behind their madness with respect to the pricings. I guess the point I'm trying to get to is interest rates have quadrupled. These developers are also business owners and they have to run a household as well.
Oh yeah. Like so many of them are just not even starting their sites. Like if they've got the funding, and even a lot of developer clients that I have, if they're class 2 developers, so building the larger kind of scale stuff, they've now just pushed in and just doing only class 1 because it's nice, easy. The residential loans rather than the commercial. Have you found
people have gone back into council and said, hey, we don't want a class 2 anymore, we want a class 1, or no, they stick to their guns?
Yeah, no, we have not like particularly anything that I've worked on, but I know that there's a lot in the areas or people I know that have altered designs to make sure that it is a class 1 design. And sometimes that could be simply as something like on a duplex if there's a common basement and splitting the basement, because there is a lot of a cost saving there from from the certifier you use to all your kind of costs associated, and
Well,
the builder that you choose as well, because there's certain class 2 builders. Not all builders are class 2 builders.
Different insurances and so forth that are associated with it. But I guess the mums and dads and the people who have that ambition to build, don't be deterred. The conversations we're having here are more so along the lines of to get a better understanding as to why costs have increased, right? The builder doesn't go and charge I know pre-2020 build costs were about, for a standard residential home.
COVID.
No, we shall not say that. Was $1,400 odd dollars, $1,460, $1,462 was the norm. Now it's at $3,000 a square meter. If we just simple maths, it's $3,000 a square meter. I've had conversations with builders and they've gone, I look at builder and a developer two separate languages there. Developers more on the class 2. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, no, look, I think developers can be in class 1 as well. It's developers just
look at your Mojo. Look at your Mojo, McDonald Homes, which is the same company, Allcastle, Metricon, Marston. They're builders.
Yeah,
they don't go to market saying they're developers, although they build on a regular basis. But I guess developers, builders, they're learning to adapt. And you touched on the point yesterday that you come from a family of developers as well.
Yeah,
they've been doing
small scale, I might add. Yeah,
but if you
look, I've been around the game a lot.
But a developer, to me, in simple terms, isn't somebody who develops 100 units a year. It's somebody who continually they're seasoned.
Yeah,
whether it's a duplex, 2 or 3 year, or whether it's a block of 4 units, whatever it may be, right? But you've been around the construction industry. You got some very good friends in that area who you work closely with on the design and build aspect, but they've learned to weather the storm. There is no perfect storm. They learn to weather it because it's a have to thing.
I know a number of clients that have gone through this process, basically breaking even on their developments just to get through, because they just need to get to the other side of it.
And is that to save face, or is that just that they've cut their losses and they've just
because I think that they'll probably end up to be at the point that if they sold the site, they couldn't even recoup their money. So I think completing the project is the only way out. Just on that as well, they're clients that have then proposed to rent the whole project rather than selling them, with anticipation that the market will go up at some point in the next 2 years.
But that comes down to hold costs.
Yeah, well, it does. So they obviously need to make it sure that it's feasible, that the rental return is paying down their interest-only loan facility as well. So if they see that they can make it work and they can hold on to that, I think it's a pretty good position. I'm positive that apartment market has to boost so very, very soon, especially with the lack of supply.
You drive around and you see places fenced off, and the first thing that comes to my head is, wonder what they're building. I was actually interesting. I thought of you last night and I explained the reasons why. I was walking in my area.
Yep.
My family decided to buy a dog, but I'm the only one that walks it. And I noticed an orange canvas covering a site around the corner from home. And I'm building this myself. They're using, through a qualified builder, an app, and they're actually doing the build themselves through this builder.
What?
I know. I should have taken a picture and sent it to you, but I
should have discussed this before we started the podcast so I can research it more.
Yeah, but I think we might need to pick up on that one again. I found it quite interesting. I know somebody come out in the media years ago launching this, but I didn't think it'll come to fruition with the environment that we're in. And it was just a standard residential home.
Yeah.
But I found that quite interesting because builders go and make their 20, 30% markup. So that means they go in for a 10% markup. Does that mean quantity over quality? I don't know.
I don't know. It's an interesting way. It just actually, you just reminded me on something about 3D printed homes. So there's currently,
you know
which one.
You know when you say that, I think of the bad wolf. I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down.
So there's actually a duplex near our office at the moment that's being built, and they've essentially done the ground floor level out of 3D printing. So there was basically like a massive 3D printer on site, and it was concrete. Yeah. So their whole idea is to save construction time and costs.
Would that come down to how developers are adapting?
Well, the interesting thing is there's another duplex that's being built not too far away. And I feel like that's actually been built at the same speed. I don't know how much it's actually like. We obviously have to dig a lot more deeper. It's obviously a new technology and it might have to adapt. But
without disclosing, you're younger than us.
Yeah,
times are going to change. By the time in the next 20 years, you're going to see a lot more than what we are. We're probably there to exit the industry, and you're probably in your prime.
Yeah, of course, I will be. I'm actually like honestly now. And Jason can speak on this as well. I'm even starting to see full, like proper houses being made out of foam. Like the actual foundation is foam, and then
that's not foam. That's called
it's polyurethane.
No. But there's a lot of like duplexes in the Southern Shire that have been built out of.
But is that based off to reduce concrete?
No, so they're using it as actual walls. So yeah, so there's two foam kind of. There's the in the slab, for the waffle pod slabs. So that's definitely a big thing. But I think what Andrew was alluding to is the walls that they're actually just rendering.
Yeah, and
polystyrene.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, I know that about 10 years ago, it could have been less denser walls came out, and
This is even a cheaper product. Like this is cheaper than cladding.
But hang on, cheaper like cladding. We're talking about weathering a storm, and there's no perfect storm, and the construction costs are soaring. So you're doing this to cut costs for the developer, but they're still passing on the same costs of what it would to just put a standard brick work up. Is that because there's a lack of brickies out there?
I'm positive. I think it's also like so if you look at it, and it's not always 100%, but you look at it, it's like, okay, brick is probably the most expensive. Or even like a diesel no. I'm saying just even like doing a whole house, complete brick, then cladding would be cheaper, and then foam is slightly cheaper again. So it's also easier to install. Yeah, it's like they go up like crazy. Like it's also like a Hebel as well. Like there's all those kind of different products.
I've seen the Hebel. I don't need to be attracted to, but Hebel. I just find that Hebel over time, during the sun, winter and summer, it sort of creates that little crack feeling, and I don't know. I mean, I've seen a few go up, and after 10 years, just like render it and go.
Look, a lot of apartment buildings are a lot of Hebel too. Like, so it's depending on the builder themselves and how comfortable they are with those products. I think that's what it comes down to. But in terms of a cost saving, like let's say a mum and dad building a house or a duplex, and they're getting a builder involved, yes, they are passing on those cost savings. Like if you sit down with a builder today and say, hey, I want to make it cheaper, that's probably the first thing they're going to look at is let's remove the bricks.
So let's narrow this down, right? We've spoken about the business end of developments in the bricks and mortar side of things. We've talked about the build times have doubled and how that affects the end game. Remember, building a house in itself is a finite game. Developing is an infinite game because you don't stop at one, right? You're a seasoned developer, so it's an infinite game. You're always looking at ways to continue adding value, but obviously cutting costs to either increase profit margin or pass that cost on, right? That's just the game. Interest rates as well has had to be heavily absorbed by the builder. And again, you can't go to your bank and go, hey, I'm paying you 4% this month. No. If it's at 6.5%, 7%, you're paying 6.5%, 7%. You try and pass that cost on, but there's only so much you can. That's why they're trying to get the build done a certain time. You got the construction costs that have soared, as we mentioned. The material prices have increased 50 to 60%. Not necessarily perfect storm, but why so many projects are unfeasible? Higher finance costs.
Well, yeah, like you look at the higher finance costs, the higher build costs, and the timeframes. So those are the three big contributing factors. And just on that as well. So you've got like three parts to a whole kind of development. If you look at it, you've got your build costs, your land component, and then your resale value. And at the moment, your build costs aren't going to come down because they're at that level. We never see things come backwards. Your land component's probably not going to come back because everyone still wants what they want for their block. So realistically, the only thing that can change is the end product value, which the crazy part about it is if, let's say just on basic apartment sites that are unfeasible at the moment, if you lift up their gross revenue, when I mean gross revenue is like the total sell out of the building, if you lift that up by 10%, most projects become feasible. So it feels like a lot of, you speak to a lot of developers and a lot of them are confident that in the next 2 to 3 years, it'll kind of phase out when apartment values go up. But even then the government is trying to push for more dwellings, and even their proposals and developers are looking at and still can't make it feasible.
I know a lot of developers are starting to cave in to local and state for approvals where they'll go, hey, we'll forego space, FSR, floor space ratio. We'll add green, we'll add a park in bigger sites in particular, not necessarily the residential, right? So they're trying to look at ways and strategize as to how the feasibility of building is achievable based off not necessarily succumbing, but saying, hey, we're here to negotiate. We're not going to stand our ground.
Yeah.
I've heard the old school developers building a proof of 10 stories and then all of a sudden they're at 12, 13, 14 because in their documentation, they've changed the shafts for the lifts to be able to allow them an extra 4 floors.
Like there is the affordable housing policy as well through state government where essentially you get 30% extra floor space. So let's say you could build, say, 10 units for argument's sake, you can now build, say, 13 and you get the 30% extra height limit. So that's if you contribute a certain amount to affordable housing, and that has to be locked in, depending on the policies, it has to be locked in between 10 and 15 years as affordable. And when we say affordable, it has to be, I think 20% below market value.
So you're sort of getting for less.
Well, the developers that I've spoken to, like they're happy. Like they look at it and they're like, okay, yeah, we're getting 20 or 30% less than the market rent, but we've got an asset in 10 to 15 years that will realize its full potential.
Yeah.
Then there's obviously other clients that are just going for the full build to rent, boarding houses, childcare centers even as well. A lot of clients are pushing into that now too.
I know of somebody who's got a house locally. They've had a DA for the last 6 months to get it DA approved. The house is worth 1.1, 1.2. Once it's DA approved for a childcare, it almost quadruples the site.
Oh wow, goes to the 4. You reckon 4?
Well, I don't understand how, but they just find they've done all the hard jars. Let's just call it double.
Yeah.
Let's just call it double. Forget about the quadruple. I've probably gone over extreme. Let's call it double. But it still is. It's the same as buying a house, getting a DA approved for a childcare and buying it for $1 million, 50 grand DA approved and selling it for 1.5.
Oh, 100%. And childcare DAs are probably one of the hardest to process as well with neighbour objections. Like I know in the Sutherland Shire, I think out of I was looking at it not too long ago. I think out of the last 7 childcare DAs, I think 4 went to court.
Oh,
And then 2 got refused. So like that's 6. I can't remember. I think the other one got approved by council.
So these are the things that consumers don't look at. It's good to understand who, what, where, when. I mean, it's the bigger picture of things. But if you could give anybody out there looking to build, what are the things you would ask them? What are the 3 key things you would say to factor in if you're a consumer looking at potentially buying a unit from a developer or wanting to build? Let's just go wanting to build.
So if wanting to build, like let's say we're assuming like a mum and dad kind of.
Let's go mum and dad.
I think find your builder first. I think that's probably the most important factor because a builder can really help with the whole design process and minimize your costs. Like if you set a builder and say, hey, I want to spend $1 million, he can always work to that. Like obviously things are going to blow out in proportion, but if you start from structure to the way that things are laid out, the way that levels are. So I think it's really important to get a builder involved from day one. And then even using architects and engineers that the builder is comfortable with. I think every builder, engineer, architect have got different ways of doing things. But I think if you can combine someone that really is knowledgeable in that area and that helps you control that process, I think that's the real winner where you're going to save a lot more money than you think.
Find yourself a good broker.
Yeah. Find yourself a good broker.
Come on, Jason.
And then 3, I think it's just about doing research. Like if you're looking at doing a duplex development and then you're planning on selling one, go out and have a look at every duplex that's up for sale. Like really do your research for months and months before you actually do something. Understand all the financing costs or understand it. Like speak to agents as well. If someone comes through one of our duplexes and they say they're looking at building, we're happy to explain those kind of things to them, but they need to understand all your costs and get really comfortable around them and ask questions. Inspect all the duplexes that are on the market, find out what's selling well, find out why it's selling well and see what you have to put in. And if you're doing it from a profit-making exercise, just remember your taste isn't what is...
Stick to the KISS theory.
Yeah.
Not everybody wants marble floors. Look,
no, yeah. Like, I always look at it as well in the sense that, and I explain to my developers, it's not what you want, it's what the market wants. And I've got perfect examples where I've sold homes in the Sutherland Shire that, you look at the cost to build and one's so much cheaper, but it still sells for more. It's just because the look of it, and it's the concepts that people wanted.
So people favor the aesthetics.
Yeah. 100%, especially like I think in the Sutherland Shire, where you then go for more of an ethnic culture, and then predominantly it's all around the structure. I want double brick, I want concrete suspended slab, all those kind of things.
For a fraction of the price.
Yep. Yeah. And then the other question you asked on it is about buying units. I think, like I said before, I think apartments are quite undervalued in most parts of Sydney. I think if you can find a good area, and I think it's really important being around good transport, good infrastructure in Sydney, but if you can find a good apartment building by a reputable developer and reputable builder, I think there's some really good opportunities there.
Is that for an owner occupied or investments as well?
I think both. Like at the end of the day, there's always different parts of the market where people can only spend to certain amounts. So it really depends. I think there's definitely a lot of opportunity out there based on just like, even if we look at build costs for apartments, they used to be able to build them, a few years back. I'm not going to say pre-COVID, a few years back.
Pre-2021, thank you.
Around the 300 maybe to 320 per apartment that they built. Now the builders I'm talking to, you're talking over 500,000.
Wow.
So the replacement cost alone on just that, without talking about our financing tripling, just that is 200,000. And you look at apartment values, have apartment values risen 200,000 in that period of time?
Not a big fan of apartments. I'm more.
Apartments have its space in the market, but what I'm saying is from a value perspective, I think they're extremely undervalued than what they actually should be.
I think that's a topic for another day. So your 3K.
Oh, we can go on for a couple of hours.
3 key takeaways. Yeah. Really, guys, engage in a good builder. Engage in a real estate agent, a really good one that knows your area. That's his farming area, or their farming area, I should say. Hint, hint. And engage in the finance broker. Them three will make your life so much easier. So Jason, thank you for joining us. Andrew, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, mate, it's a pleasure. And I'm very sure we'll have you back soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.